Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast, make sure you like content like this. If you like content like this, make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Illeana. Illeana is here today to tell a journey of compassion, comparison, and disconnected power. Her journey has led her all over the world through studies of spirituality, metaphysics, unseen realms, and new age ideas. We will be touching on religion, disempowering beliefs, and her love for transforming lives. I am so excited for this podcast. Hello, lady. How are you? Through your journey and all of the challenges that you've gone through in your life, have you discovered any sort of like a process that you go through yourself that you can share with us as far as, coming to a challenge and then climbing up that hurdle and overcoming it? Do you have any advice that you could give us as far as some steps that you take when you come face to face with something that's not ideal?
So everyone's journey is really different, and everybody is at a very different point in their lives.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this depends on your personal evolution and where you are at what stage of the game you're at. So for me, to awaken, I had to be basically going through a crisis. The most important thing in my life was my marriage. It wasn't me, it was my marriage. And when that kind of dissolved around me, it just threw me right to the bottom, like right in the deepest hole. So I had to figure out emotionally.
Okay.
I had to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? And what did I do wrong? What happened here to bring me to this place? So I did a number of different things. First of all, I went to therapy because I was drowning in sorrow and sadness and grief. And then I began to read everything I could find my hands on codependence, on why marriages broke up, on relationships, on communications, on all of these things. So for me, that was how I started the journey. I also went to a course that was helping people who were going through breakups. So we were in a group environment, so we were all going through the same thing. So there was a lot of community support in that.
Beautiful.
So I attacked it from many different angles, because what was happening to me was so unacceptable to me that I wanted to make sure it never happened again, and that I learned everything I could out of it. And one of the most important things that I learned was that I was not a victim of a marriage breaking down. I had a lot to do with it breaking down. It wasn't just happening to me. I wasn't a victim, but I had contributed to it.
Yes.
And that was very hard to swallow, very hard to come to terms with. But it was also very freeing, because it allowed me to see that I had power to change this so that it would not happen again. And this is where self-awareness comes in. I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of crying. And I did a lot of talking with a therapist. I did energy work. And throughout the years, I've done lots of different modalities, depending on what was happening in my life, because that was the first challenge, but there were many, many others throughout my life. So I would say becoming aware of yourself and what is happening inside of you and your thoughts and behavior patterns that are not helpful to you is the first step.
Got
and
it.
then getting help with that. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. You can be, being empowered and being strong doesn't mean you know everything or you can do everything on your own. Empowered people and confident people seek help when needed, because none of us is an island, right? We're all interdependent on each other. And
Yeah.
knowing where your limitations are and working with those in an intelligent and self-aware way is hugely important to be able to grow as a person, right? And
Yeah.
there's layers and there's steps and there's different things that you do at different times in your life. But that's what, if there's a challenge, start to pull out of the situation and try to see what is really happening, as if maybe it was a movie. Maybe if it's happening to someone else, watch yourself as if you're watching a movie and see if you can pull yourself out of the emotional turmoil, because that's when it's hardest for us to really make sense, when we're in deep emotional turmoil.
I love the fact that you're talking about the movie thing. I remember when I was in my past abusive relationship and I was unsure. I remember I always used to think to myself, is this normal? Like, is what he's doing or saying or acting, is this normal? Is this what other people are going through? And I remember there was a certain point or time period where I would pull, like exactly what you said, I would pull myself out and actually view it as a movie and think to myself, if I saw this, if I was just watching this, somebody else's life or in a movie, is this appropriate behavior or not? That's like a great way to really like step back and analyze what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%. Do we want to read this from this Facebook user? You
Sure.
want to read it out loud?
So we have someone commenting, early therapy wise, so many ignore therapy. Exactly. But the record shows that therapy can help. Yes, journaling, again, most benefit from journaling. Absolutely. Yeah, behavior patterns. Look at yourself. Great contribution, Ileana. Thanks. You're welcome.
Very
This is
cool.
what we teach in our women's courses, which I know we're going to discuss a little bit later. But becoming aware of what is operating inside of you, because until you're aware, it's a pattern in a background program that you have no control over.
Exactly. Just so that you know, whoever just messaged that one or two, in the description there, StreamYard gives permission for your name to be shown. So if you want your name to be shown, you just have to go into the description of where we are, and StreamYard has a little link. You press the link and give them permission. I want to ask you, what do you think happened to you where you at such a early age in your 20s um, gave you the ability to be able to think differently? Do you think something happened to you when you were younger where you felt at a point where you could think differently and that's how it kind of happened, or did somebody tell you? How do you think you got to that point? Because what I find a lot of times is some people get it like you, and then other people sit in the problem and they enjoy the problem. What's the difference, do you think, between those two types of people?
I think there's a couple of things. You want to hear the metaphysical explanation?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay. So I believe that we incarnate in our lives with a particular plan and with a particular soul maturity. So there are souls that have lived through many different lives and have attained a certain level of maturity, and they come here with a specific purpose that they need to fulfill that affects a lot of other people. And this is not something that ever goes away despite any other kind of conditioning that happens, because it's always percolating in the back of their minds and their psyche. So for me, I was always interested in things that were not mainstream. I loved science fiction, fantasy. I could explore possibilities. I believed in other realms. And I just knew that this life and this 3D reality we live in is not everything there is. This was like a deep innate knowledge that I didn't really learn from any books. It was just something I was born with and I carried with me throughout. And even with the Jehovah's Witness conditioning, that was only very surface for me. I I never really
Okay.
fully bought into it. No.
Yeah.
So when I left, it didn't mean anything to me anymore. It didn't affect me anymore. I never thought about it. I always had friends outside. I picked my own friends. I picked my own books that I read. I made my own choices. So I think that's, to me, is the most significant thing. And also because I have always wanted to learn more and I have always reached for something else. It has always been hugely important to me to see more possibilities than just what we have, what we're told, and because those stories have never been enough for me.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is. Also, my early upbringing, as I told you, I was in a very kind of relaxed, liberal environment with my parents at the time. They had the Iliad and the Odyssey and mythology and psychology books, and I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. So my mind was already fed with these ideas. And then, the whole religion thing came in, and I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. It's just not right. It's just too small, right? And so in my early 20s, when my parents were away, is when I made my decision because I knew that being authentic and living according to my own inner drive and what I needed to do was the most important thing in my own life. You cannot live for other people, especially something like belonging to a religion and what your beliefs are. They're your beliefs or they're for someone else. And that to me, it was just not an option. And that's why
Yeah.
I had the strength to leave.
That totally makes sense. 100%. How does one get to that point though? Like if they're 32 years old and don't have any of that in their backing. Like I remember in my early 30s having the epiphany of being able to make a choice. I didn't even know that that was a thing. Like it hit me so hard that I have a choice. So how does somebody get to that point when they've been living a certain way their whole life and then they're hitting a wall of like something's not right?
So it's just not enough anymore. The way I'm living is just not satisfying something within my soul. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say to begin doing some reading and watching some YouTube videos about some non-mainstream stuff. So maybe do some research into metaphysics, into some New Age ideas, and everyone again will be on a different path. I mean, I can recommend some books,
What's a book
depending.
you would recommend? Like just like a nugget of information.
Well, I
Nothing where
don't
you're
know. Yeah,
diving into the deep.
I don't know books with one nugget, but I can tell you one of the most important books I ever read was called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, and that talks about the soul on a spirit level and how it comes into this life and what happens here and why we incarnate where we do and how we choose everything and how we have our soul contracts. So for me, that's what pulled me out of what was happening with me. And I thought, oh, well, there's a greater purpose here. Now I'm starting to understand why things are happening the way they are and that I'm not being manipulated like a chess piece. Because this was a huge thing for me that things were happening to me and I couldn't understand why. So I began to understand that I came to learn certain lessons and accomplish certain things. And now I know that if I had not been through all of the things that I've been through, all the difficulties and challenges, I wouldn't be able to speak from a place of authority and having been there and understanding what those are and helping others throughout their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Because when you speak from experience, it's a very different thing than when you speak from books or from when you speak from head knowledge. I've been through all these things. I've suffered depression. I've been suicidal. I know what it's like to be like really in that very dark place. And I've been able to come out and create something very different for my life because my whole perception about who I am and what I'm doing here has shifted enormously.
Yeah, definitely.